There is a word from the Lord today, and we're in our series on Plan B. Hallelujah. Plan B, living. Hallelujah. Anybody been living in Plan B? Amen. Amen. So my sermon title in the series today is When God Says No to Plan A. When God says no to Plan A. You know, last Sunday I did what do you do when Plan A doesn't work out, but what do you do when God says no to our Plan A? I told you last Sunday, do you remember the day that you discovered that your life wasn't going to turn out quite the way you thought? Do you remember that day when you found out that life wasn't going to unfold the way you thought it was going to unfold? Do you remember the day when your children weren't going to turn out quite the way you had planned for them to turn out? You remember the day when they became just a complete handful and you never thought that they would take you there, and they have taken you there and then some. Well, beloved, you remember the day all of us have had dreams and wishes and goals and expectations that for a variety of reasons have not come to fruition. We remember that how plans just fizzle and expectations come to nothing, and even trusted people let us down. Or we even let ourselves down. Do you remember the day when dreams are shattered or have slipped away? In fact, has this happened to anybody in here? What I'm talking about? Has it happened to you, beloved, where your Plan A has been shattered? And this is the thing about it. The majority of us, I said even last week, is the majority of us had a Plan A. We had all of this, we had it pictured in our mind the way our lives should have been. In fact, we have this picture of how Plan A was supposed to operate, and for some of us, we're looking at our lives and we're looking at what we expected, and it's just a stark reminder that things have not turned out the way that we wanted them to. We had all of the dreams, both large and small. We had all kinds of expectations, some reasonable and some unreasonable. We had all of this mental picture of how our lives were going to go. I told you last week you had it all planned out. Yes, you did. You had it planned out. You had it planned out where you were going to go to school, and Lord have mercy, what major you was going to have. You even had it planned out how you was going to act when you walked across the stage to get your degree, and you had it all planned out. You had it planned out where you were going to work and all of that, and what kind of career you were going to have. You had it all planned out, who you were going to marry and what they were going to look like and how they were going to treat you and how you were going to treat them. You had it all planned out. You had it all planned out what your kids were going to be like. They weren't going to be the seed of Chucky. They was going to be some good kids, and you had it all planned out. Oh, Lord have mercy. You had it all planned out, and then all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, Plan A comes to an abrupt halt. And now you're trying to figure out, what on earth do I do next? Where do I go from here? Maybe that realization hits you in the form of an illness. You planned the doctor's appointment before you went to work. You said, I'm going to have the doctor's appointment during my lunch hour. I'll run over there, take my physical and all that, and then run back to work. And then the doctor said, I see something. And you looking at the doctor saying, okay, well, just give me some medication and I'll get on back to work. And the doctor said, no, I see something. I see something on your chest. Something is abnormal in your blood. Something is abnormal on the x-ray. I see something. Okay, doctor, just give me a pill and then I'll be, no, I see something. You need to sit down because I see something. And then all of a sudden you could hear dust drop as the doctor told you the terrifying news that you have cancer. And then suddenly you descended into the world of hospital beds and IVs, chemotherapy, and all kinds of things. Never in your wildest dreams could you have imagined that cancer would be in your system. All of a sudden, some of us have gone along in life, and then suddenly the death of a loved one. Out of the blue, an accident. Out of the blue, they died in their sleep. Out of the blue, somebody who was so full of life the day before you talked to them, full of life that night. And all of a sudden, the next day, you come and get the word, and you're such in shock because that was not on your radar, that was going to happen. And all of a sudden, all of the dreams that you had have been shattered. You thought that you were going to finish your life with this partner, this marriage, and then it ends in divorce. And not just any divorce, a very bitter one, where you're fighting back and forth and tit for tat, and all kinds of gloves are off at that point. And somehow the hurt is so deep, and it's permeating everything about you, and the disappointments, and all you can say is, Father, I stretch my hands to thee. You get the call in the middle of the night that your son and your daughter is somewhere locked up in the Cook County jail. And you know that they were not raised that way. And there you are sitting there in a place you never in a million years. In fact, you're looking at your child and you thank God that there's glass separating you, because if you could reach through there. Oh, no, the Lord knew what he was talking about when he put that behind there, because if I could get behind there, ooh, I'm going to break your neck. You better be glad that you're in there and protecting you from me. And you say, Lord, what have I done to make this race so hard to run? You sit there and say, what on earth is happening to my life and to my family and to my future? Now, I know that sometimes our disappointments are clearly our fault. We made poor decisions and we took wrong turns, and took us 5 minutes to get off the path, and it's taken us 15 years to get back on. We made stupid decisions and all of that, and now we're trying to figure out how we're going to survive, how we're going to finish school now that we've made all these stupid mistakes, and how are we going to keep the house together, and how are we going to keep the family together because of our foolish discretions and all of those things. How on earth are we going to do it? Sometimes it's not even our fault. Sometimes it's somebody else's fault. Somebody else's poor decision, wrong move on the highway caused that accident that killed my loved one. Somehow someone's poor decision to drink and get drunk and get on the road has killed it. Sometimes the poor decision is in our house, where you think all the bills are being paid and they're somewhere gambling with your money on the riverboat. Gambling everything away, and you find out when you come home in your house, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone. And you've got to be evicted. Sometimes, beloved, it's a little bit of both. You know, I told you, then all of a sudden, life just falls apart, sometimes with no explanation at all. It seems like it's totally random. From out of the blue, these things happen. I told you last week that I was sitting with my son Miles, and we were watching a suspenseful movie, and we heard the noise, dun 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 dun, music. And Miles told me, he said, something's going to happen. And I said, how do you know? And he said, because don't you hear the music? Whenever you hear that dun 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 dun, that means something's going to happen, Daddy. And I thought about it. I said, I wish that life had some music like that. I wish we had some dun 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 music that would tell us some stuff to watch out for. I wish we had some dun 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 music that said crazy person ahead. Dun 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 dun. Don't marry that person. Dun 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 dun. Keep going. Dun 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 dun. Don't answer the phone. Dun 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 dun. Don't give them your number. Dun 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 dun. Don't answer the email. Dun 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 dun. Don't go work there. Dun 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 dun. But for some reason, life doesn't always work that way. But often our dreams seem shattered when we least expect it. And there is no warning that plan A will be shattered. You look up, beloved, and all of a sudden, God has said no to all of our plans. Now, I said all of this to say that what do you do when you said, when we've done some stuff to shatter plan A? But what happens when God shatters our plan A? What happens when God says no to our plan A? And I don't know about you, but one of the hardest words to accept is the word no. I don't know about you, but I have a hard time accepting when God says no to all of the plans and dreams I have. Sometimes I have a hard time because I was always taught that no is for people who don't know. You hear no, go in there and still turn the place out because they may say yes. But I want you to know when God says no, it seems so final and so cold. Beloved, it's hard to have prepared and laid out plan A with great perfection. I did. And I prepared for it. I laid it out, Lord. You said, you dropped it in my spirit, I thought. And so I had my heart on that situation. I had my heart on that job, my heart on that ministry. I had my heart on that relationship. I had my heart on that place to live. I had my heart on that school. And everything in my spirit said yes to my plan A. But God turned around and said no to it. Now here's the thing. He does not say not yet, because I could deal with not yet. But he says no. And that is difficult to accept. How do we handle when God says no to our plan A? I don't know about you, but I need to know how to do that, how to handle it. And particularly when I have been faithful, Lord. I read my Bible. I'm doing the right thing, and I'm doing all that I'm supposed to do. And why does this keep happening? Why don't you deliver me? Why don't you heal me? Why don't you provide a sense of relief? I want some answers today, Lord, because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I need to understand, why is this thing so hard, and how long? I know you keep saying weeping may endure for a night, but I want to know, how long is this night going to be? How long is this suffering going to be? Because I'm about to lose my mind. About to lose it. I'm about to lose it. I don't want to hear the no. My heart can't handle the no. My heart can't handle the no to my plans. Well, beloved, if you're feeling like this, I want you to be mindful of our chapter today. Our text today is the final chapter of 1 Chronicles, and it points out how David kept his faith strong in the midst of when God said no to his plans. David shows us how to trust God even when we don't understand what God is always doing. David shows us even how to praise God in the midst of a no situation. David helped us to understand, and he helped me to understand how when God says no to our plan A, you need to know that this shepherd boy, this giant killer, this musician, this poet of many and author of many of the Psalms that we enjoy, this king of Israel was one of the greatest men in the Old Testament. In fact, many of us quote from the Psalms during our moments of great joy and profound sorrow. The anointing of David as king and his rise to the throne was a critical event in Israel's history. Beloved, the story of David begins in 1 Samuel, the 16th chapter, From our point of view, from where we stand, from our vantage point, looking at the evidence, David's plan A, his desire to build the temple for God, should touch the very heart of God. It seemed like a perfect plan A from where we stand. From where David stood, it seemed like a perfect plan A. Because you know why it seemed like a perfect plan A? Because it was David who returned the ark of the covenant of God. It was David who returned the ark to Jerusalem. It was David who reinstituted the centrality of worship of the one true and living God. It was David. In fact, 2 Samuel 8:15 says that David ruled over all of Israel, and he ruled well and fair and even-handed in all of his duties and relationships. And beloved, I want you to know the Bible makes no effort of hiding David's failures and some of his dysfunction. Yet, he is remembered and respected for his heart for God. In fact, the Bible says that David was a man after God's own heart. So surely David would be the one to build the temple. Surely David would be the one. What a perfect plan A. And David believed in his heart that his greatest contribution to God would be the building of the temple to house the Ark of the Covenant. Plan A. Beloved, this was a fitting and righteous task for a man who had constantly experienced the blessings of God. Therefore, during the later years of David's reign, since he was so clear that God had given him this plan, he set out to pursue plan A, the building of the temple. And David laid up great treasures of gold and silver and bronze and iron in order to build this house, which was plan A. He fixed his heart on this. And whatever it cost, David was ready to make the sacrifice so that the ark of the covenant may have a place to rest on earth. The one thing that David didn't know was that God had specifically designed him for a certain task. And even though he wanted to build this house for God, he couldn't do it, beloved. And the reason that he couldn't do it, because God had specifically designed Solomon for the task. You see, beloved, when God said no to our plan A, many of us, just like David, you know our hearts are heavy because of it. You have had your heart on something which was plan A. You had it all planned out, that job, that position. You went to school for the position. You stayed up late trying to get yourself together in your degree, and God said no. That is difficult to deal with because everything in your spirit said yes. Everything pointed to yes, but God said no to your plan A. He said, you are not to build a house for my name, David, because you are a warrior and have shed blood. Now, I know that David had his issues, but God gave him the plans, didn't he? God gave him the plans to build it and the money to sustain it. God gave David every painstaking detail. And I don't know about you, but I need some answers when I read this particular passage. I have put too much time into it. I've been through too many changes. I need some answers. I think I deserve some answers from you, God. You don't know, Lord. You understand what I've been through. My good outweighs my bad, Lord. You told me that you're the God that allows U-turns, and I want to know why. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Why is my plan A being shattered, and why am I in the midst of all this drama? Help me, somebody. Why is this happening? And don't act like you have never questioned God. Some people would say to me, you don't question God, Reverend Griffin. Well, I want you to know, you better than Jesus then, huh? Because he questioned God. He said, God, why have thou forsaken me? Why is this happening to me? And beloved, you need to know that there's sometimes we want explanations from God. We want an explanation. God, why is this happening to me? And we want to know why is all of these things and these changes, why have our plans been shattered right before our very eyes? We're not bad people, God. Why has this happened? Why is this drama happen? Why my mother so soon? Why this situation so fast? Why did this happen? Why cancer? Why all of this? Well, you need to know, as you ask God, you need to know that God is not always in the explaining business. He will not always explain everything that you ask, but He is in the sustaining business. Whatever you're going through, He promised to sustain us through it. And I believe that there are times that God is trying to answer some of our questions, but our minds are not capable of handling the answer. When Job said, "Why is all this happening to me?" God responded, "Where were you, Job, when I laid the foundation of the earth? Where were you when I hung the clouds in the sky?" In other words, Job, you're not on my level. You are a part of this thing, so you'll never understand the whole picture. In fact, I'm sure God blurted out, "Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purposes that prevail." In other words, this is not Burger King. You cannot have it your way. God does not operate the way we operate. We may not understand, but God has a reason for why God does what God does. There is a reason that God said no to your plan A. There have been times when I look back over my life, and when you look back over your life, there have been times that you wanted a yes so bad from God. But now that you look back over your life, you thank God for the no. How many of us have thought that we could not live without that person? We were so in love, our nose was so wide open. And then they rejected us and they left us, and we sat boo-hooing in sackcloth clothes, mourning. We came to the altar all in ashes and all over us, mourning our loss, and we can't believe that we cannot make it, and why me, and we don't want to come out of the house, and we sitting home and ate a whole gallon of ice cream and everything else, and we just all depressed and everything. Don't want to do nothing. Don't want to go anywhere because we're sad, because we wanted that person. And then it just aches us that they found somebody, and it aches us, and it aches us that they've moved on, and it troubles us. And we sitting there saying, "Why, Lord, why has this happened to me?" 5 years later, you in Jewel, and you look up and you say, "I know that's not them. Oh my goodness gracious, that's not them." And you say, "Ooh, they look so crazy," and we were trying to tell you that. We were trying to tell you they look crazy when you were dating them, but you couldn't see it. And so as a result, you look at like, "I was attracted to that." That's what we were saying. That's what we were saying. And you're sitting there like, whoa, you don't even want them to see you. And so you go on, you gather your little stuff and go on out the store, and you hollering, "Thank you, Lord." Woo, Lord have mercy. I was interested in marrying that. Lord have mercy. What was wrong with me? And you know what? And sometimes we'll sit in the parking lot and point our finger up to God. "Lord, if you ever see that, I do that again, hit me upside the head. Do whatever you need to do so that I don't marry no crazy person again." So some of us, we thank God for the no right now. We didn't then, but we thank God for the no. See, right now, some of us are thanking God for the downsides that we had 10 years ago, because now we went back to school and got our degree. And some of us have started our own businesses because that door was closed and God opened another. I may not understand it all right now, but the songwriter writes in our tradition that we will understand it better by and by. When it comes to kingdom living, there are certain tasks that God specifically designs each of us for. And I keep telling you, beloved, we are a part of a purpose that God has for each of our lives. And God has chosen each of us. He said, I know the thoughts and plans I have for you. And please know that ignorance to your purpose does not cancel it out. God has plans for us. But in this text, it helps us to see that there are several things that David did, and I think if we do them, we will be able to live victorious in God's plan B. See, what we must do, even if God says no, we need to understand that this is important, because whenever you don't understand your purpose and your place or your season, abuse will occur. The devil will discourage you because he does not want you to find God's yes for your life. He doesn't want you to find your assignment and your place and your gift. He doesn't want you. He wants you to be trapped in good when you can be in great. He doesn't want you to go from good to great. He wants you to stay at good, or he wants you to stay at mediocre. He doesn't want you to become excellent. Because see, understand this, nothing gives us peace like knowing God's yes in our lives. Nothing gives us peace like knowing why we are here and what we were created to do. And please, God, remember, please, beloved, God has a purpose for everyone. Do you know God has called some of us to preach, some of us to teach, some of us to sing, some of us to run businesses? Whatever it may be, the fact remains that God has chosen us for a specific task. We have been marked for destiny, and David had a certain destiny, and he had fulfilled it. He was there to lead his people on the successful military campaigns. He was there to bring forth this the true and living God to the centrality of worship. He was there, but the problem comes when we don't understand our purpose and understand our season. You have to know that God calls us for different seasons, and in different seasons he has different purposes. And for me, this season is to pastor Oakdale. And for some of us, you need to know your season. You need to know your lane, because all of us have a lane. God gives all of us a starting point. He gives us a lane in the journey of life. And the problem comes in when we're on this journey and we keep going forward. The problem comes in when we're looking at other people's lane, when we're looking at what God is doing in other people, that causes us to trip. Because each season, even our winters, have a purpose. This season, God is calling you, beloved, and you need to know that. But here's the other thing: when God says no to our plan A, we must be in tune with God so that he can tell us our next move and our next plan. You need to know, beloved, that David was so in tune with God that God could tell him his purpose. God could tell him his next move in this particular season of his life. David was so in tune with God that God could tell him that your greatest accomplishments to the temple will not be the construction of the temple, but your greatest accomplishment will be the preparation. You are going to lay the groundwork, but you won't see the final product. Beloved, you may have a desire to build something or do something or create something, but if God says no, will you do the preparation for somebody else? You got to know, beloved, this happened even in Oakdale. Pastor Jemison desired, and on Tuesday we talked about it in our congregational meeting, that we will build a ministry center next door, and that we will build the senior citizen center on 107th that the alderman has given us the land for. These were visions of Pastor Jemison. And Pastor Jemison had the vision that when he would retire in February of 2000, that he would cut the ribbon of the rec center next door. Do you know that opposition occurred and God said no to the project? God said, Pastor Jemison, you're not going to do that. You laid the groundwork. It will be Griffin's responsibility to do that. It will be his responsibility to do the senior project. And you know, there'll be days that I'll lay out a vision for Oakdale for the next 20 years, and it'll be somebody else's job to fulfill parts of that vision as well. Because you need to know, if your plans are not in tune with God and his purposes, you will encounter problems. You cannot completely undertake the work of God if you're not in tune with him. Many people are doing work for God that God did not ask for. We want to know why God has not said thank you, but God didn't ask you to do it. I remember the story that the old preachers used to tell about the farmer who was planting his crops in the heat of the day. He's plowing in the heat of the day, and he looks up and he sees PC. And all of a sudden, he runs into the house and drops everything. And he runs into the house and he said, baby, she said, what's wrong? I was plowing the field in the heat of the day, and I looked up and the Lord put in the sky PC. And so he told me to preach Christ. He called me to preach, baby. He called me to preach. And so he created this church, this little house church, and nobody came. And he was forcing his family to come, and nothing got off the ground. And 6 months, 7 months later, and then almost a year later, his wife turned to him and she said to him, baby, what did you see that day? He said, I was plowing the field in the heat of the day, and I looked up and I saw PC, preach Christ. She said, well, since we're farmers, do you think the Lord might have meant plant corn? And so the moral to that whole piece is that many of us are frustrated and doing things that God has not ordained. We want God to say thank you to stuff that he didn't order. Some of us are in positions that God didn't tell you to get in. Some of us are doing things that God never told you. Some are singing in the choir when they ought to be ushers. Some are ushers when they ought to be in the choir. Some are preaching and they ought to be sitting down. Some are serving in children's church and they don't even like children. And so this is a shame. And many of us wonder why God is not blessing it. Well, we all love to go out to eat, and God is saying, give me what I've ordered, and not only will I pay for it, but I'll have the nerve to leave a tip. We keep giving the Lord what he has not ordered and what he has not asked for, and then we wonder why we're frustrated. But here's the next thing that we need to learn. We need to learn when God says no to our plan A, that we must not become victims. We must not become bitter and act like victims. David wasn't bitter about God's decision. He didn't walk around mad at God and saying, I don't understand how this thing found, how on earth that he allowed Solomon to do this. I don't understand how Solomon is allowed to do this when you know that I did all of this work in preparation for it. He does not complain about this. He does not get angry. Instead of complaining, David decides to help do Solomon's job. He decides to help Solomon do the job. He prepared the plans and the materials to get the work done. You see, many of us, when our plan A is shattered, we become victims and we complain about God's change of plans in our lives. We blame everybody, and we blame everybody. And some of us are so selfish and so mean and so self-centered that we destroy the plans so that no one else can be able to do it. We sit at work and sabotage the whole operation because we weren't asked to be supervisors. I ain't gonna get no help in here today. We get mad and everything else, and we would have not made it easy for Solomon. But there are reasons that God said no, so we don't have to be a victim. But here's this other thing as I move quickly to the close. We have to learn from this passage that when God says no to us, we must say yes to whom he has chosen. David was prepared to help Solomon. In fact, upon completing this strategy, David introduces his son as his successor. David calls together all those that were in positions of leadership, and he called them together with the first and overarching purpose of letting them know that just as they have been chosen for their positions, another has been chosen by God for the position to undertake the Lord's kingdom and the building of the temple. David shared his wisdom and his experience. And David knew that that Solomon was going to have to carry on the work. So David told David to pick up the mantle Pick up the mantle, because you're going to face some of the same enemies and some of the same situations. And so David wanted to give Solomon something of substance. He wanted to remind him of his commitment to obey God. And David tried to tell Solomon that God has a way of doing things, and God's word must be obeyed, whether you're conquering enemies or settling the land. God's people are required to do it God's way. David underscores the importance of this by saying, be careful to follow the Lord's commands. Be careful that you may possess the good land and pass it on as an inheritance to your descendants forever. Beloved, we've got to let our children know how we made it. We've got to give them some wisdom like David gave Solomon some wisdom. Our young people need to know that we didn't just arrive here. We didn't just get what we had. There's a lot of work and sacrifice that went into it. And if there's one thing that plagues us, is our inability to consistently pass on our wisdom and our history and our values. We don't pass on the struggle from one generation to another. We don't share because it's all about me, myself, and I. I have mine and you get yours. We have created selfish Christians who don't want to sacrifice, who don't want to suffer, who don't want to help anybody, who doesn't want to do anything. And the sad part is somebody took some time for us. Somebody coached us. Somebody mentored us. Somebody showed us the way. We have to remember that each generation lays the foundation upon which the next generation will stand. Each generation stands on the shoulders of the previous generation. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and we're always indebted to those who served before us. You know, our mothers and our fathers, what did they leave you? What did your grandmother and your grandfather leave us? David stood on the shoulders of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and thus when he looked back over his life, he gained tremendous courage from these men of faith. In fact, when we look at our history, because we're in Black History Month, we look at it. What are we communicating to our children? Are we communicating the faith of our struggle, communicating the history of our struggle? When God told a generation of people that they would not see freedom on this side, that they would stay enslaved in slavery, that they would still be enslaved, that they would not see the end of slavery or segregation. Do you know that those people did not stop there? They said, Lord, if we won't see freedom, we will prepare our children so that they will walk in freedom. Do you know that some of the stuff that we're doing is not for us, but for the next generation? I believe that there were people in my family who were on slave plantations, who were down on bended knees saying, Lord, let my great-great-grandchildren not have to deal with what I'm dealing with. If I can't see it, Lord, let my children not have to deal with all of that. Because it's about the next generation. Some of the things you're dealing with ain't for you. It's for your seed. It's for your children's children. They laid the groundwork, got up and caught the 5:15 bus and walked over the other side of town to clean up the people's home so that you could have a better life. They said, I can't go to school, but you go. As you go, you go. You take this little money and go on and get an education. You take this little money and go on and go up north and get a better life for yourself and get out of this racism and discrimination and go up there and live a better life than we've lived. Too old to make that journey up there, but you all go on and take the little money that we have and you press your way. We got to think about people like that. And last but not least, know that when God shatters our plan A, that means he has something better for us. God's plan B is much better than any of our plan A. And I'll say this. I was called to preach at Salem Baptist Church on N Street in Washington, D.C. Pastor Travis, Herbert Travis, had pastored that church ever since Lincoln posed for pennies. We've been there about 100 years, about 50 years. Pastor Travis had pastored that church. And I got a call to preach. And in the middle of that, Pastor Travis said, well, he said, I couldn't go to school and get all that education because we worked on the farm and just didn't have all the money. But I want you to go to school, get you some education, boy, so you'll be a trained preacher. And he wrote, along with Pastor Gregory, my recommendation to go to Harvard. While I was at Harvard that first year, I just was on my way, and Pastor Travis had died. And I had planned to do my internship and did all the paperwork to do my internship at Salem Baptist Church. And I was ready to come back, and here I was, filled out all the paperwork. And then around January or February, I got a call from Salem, from the new pastor. And he told me, I don't know you, young man, so I'm not comfortable with you coming and doing your internship here. You need to find another church to do your intern. So I'm devastated because I called the field education office and all the slots had been filled. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan B. My plan A had been shattered, and I was devastated. And one of my friends, he told me, I called him up. He said, what's wrong? I said, man, I'm devastated because I planned to work at my church in D.C., and all of a sudden they have rejected me. And he told me a few weeks later, he called me, he said, why don't you come to New York City for the weekend? So I came to New York for the weekend. And he said, Sunday we were on our way to church, he said, hey, let's go over to that church where Abyssinia, they got a new pastor. Dr. Butts has been made their new pastor there. And he said, let's go over there. You know, he went to Morehouse, and so, okay, all right, I'll go over there. So we went over there, and I sat in the balcony of Abyssinian. And Mike Bryant, who my friend, he leaned over to me, he said, hey, man, why don't you do your internship at Abyssinian? And I said, oh, they probably have hundreds of people who want to do their internship. And he said, you don't know until you ask. And he said, go now, go right now and meet him at the end of the service. You'll see him coming out of the sanctuary. You can meet him. And so I went on down, and I went down the back stairs of Abyssinian and came up. And as soon as I came up the stairs to go to the church office, Reverend Butts reached his hand out to me. And he said, hey, young brother. And I said, Pastor, I want to talk to you. Can I have a meeting with you? And he said, well, come on and meet right now. We went into his office, and he was changing his clothes, and he said to me, what can I do for you? I said, I need a place to do my internship. And I think I could learn a lot here at Abyssinian. And he said, why do you want to come here? And I said, I think I could learn a lot here. He said, well, where did you go to school? I said, I went to Morehouse. He said, well, so did I. Okay. And then we talked a little bit more, and he said, I'm on my way to South Africa to see Mandela be released from prison. And when I come back, I want a letter stating that you're going, your date of arrival. And I said, but you don't really know me, so is it just like that? And he said, just like that. And I'm sitting there. My plan A had been shattered, and God enacted a plan B. And now I look back, those 20 years, that was the best place for me to be. And you know, I bring this story up because last week I sat down. I was in Atlanta at Morehouse when Reverend Butts, they unveiled a portrait of him to hang in the college. And I introduced him, and I'm sitting on that stage at Morehouse with all of my academic regalia looking like I got some sense. And I looked at myself and I said, Lord, who would have ever thought that a little black boy from Kenosha, Wisconsin would be sitting on this stage introducing his pastor? Who would have ever thought that? And then I thought about, whenever I go to D.C. now, and I went to Salem for the first time when I got to Abyssinian and enjoyed my experience, I gave the pastor a thank you note to thank him for rejecting me. I thank him. And see, the thing about it is, is don't get mad at some folk for rejecting and closing the door. Write them a thank you note to say, you pushed me into my destiny. You made me see that I'm more than that. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Whatever has happened to your plan A, know that God's plan B is much better than any plan A that you will ever have. Let's give God some praise in this place today.